All right, welcome to Out from the Cube. We are at episode 122, and we only have about 10 minutes today, but as you can tell, if you are watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on just the audio, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, Out from the Cube, and to just do a quick search. If you're watching, you can tell this is not my basement, this is not my dining room. We have upped our game. Microsoft here in Midtown St. Louis has been kind enough to allow us to use some of their space that they use for the recordings. And we've got leadership books and CEO books, and we got the Arch, and we have Augusta National, it looks like, and other places to the left and right of us. So it's a great place to start recording some of the content that we create for ourselves, for Out from the Cube, and for our YouTube channel, and also for our sponsor, Polaris Solutions. So this will just be a quick 15-minute, 10-minute video or recording podcast that we'll put out today. And really what I want to just hit on today, other than showing the great digs at where we can kind of record now for a little bit, not all the time, but I did a LinkedIn Live this morning and really enjoyed the conversation I had with Jason Wells. Jason, those that have listened to the podcast before, Jason's been on 30 plus times. He is in the business executive coaching space now and is doing really well. He's actually, for those that are interested, Jason did a TED Talk here in Clayton, Missouri 2 weeks ago, and I believe within the next couple days, Jason will have that released, and I'll have the URL up on our site. You can look for that on LinkedIn. And there was a group of maybe 15 people that all did TEDx talks here in St. Louis, and Jason was part of that and gave a great talk, and I got a lot out of some conversations with him about that. But I was talking with Jason early this morning. We both happened to be up drinking coffee. I texted him, said, hey, let's do a LinkedIn Live episode. So we jumped on real quick. We're still figuring out the technical limitations to LinkedIn Live and some of the third-party tools you have to use. So it actually cut off at one point in the middle of that episode. So we spun it back up. But Jason, we were talking about elite teams, and this is the conversation for the next 8 or so minutes. And it really resonated and hit me on two fronts with things Jason was saying. One, the first thing Jason said this morning that I wrote down in my notes and underlined and highlighted and have given a fair amount of thought to in the past 4 hours is he was doing something called PGC. It's a company that he works for in the year round. It's called the Point Guard College, and he gets flown all over the nation on a weekly basis to give basketball instructions to elite caliber athletes. But at this particular place he was at, they have always done it in really nice gyms and venues. This particular week, last week for him, they did not have access to that gym. So at the last minute, they had to pivot. They weren't able to use a gym. People had paid for a gym, paid for a certain level of instruction. They didn't want to have to use blacktops and go outside onto the playground, but that is exactly what they wound up doing. So they pivoted from a gym and courts and air conditioning and water coolers and basketballs on wood and all that sort of stuff to outdoor 90-degree heat, water all over the place, indoor basketballs being used on concrete, and to his point of $200 tennis shoes now being used on playgrounds, they wound up doing that. And here's the point of all of that. He said that the attitude reflects the leadership. That if they would have panicked, if they would have said, oh, this isn't great, this isn't good, we're sorry you have to do this, I know you paid for X and you didn't get it, and I know that you have to use your nice shoes and basketballs outside, that the clients, the kids, the athletes, and the parents all would have been just as disappointed. But they took it on a different angle, and they were like unfazed by it. They actually framed it like, man, we get to go play outside, we get to go do this, this is how I grew up playing, you get to go play on the blacktops. And they painted that entire picture of excitement and lucky for you, and this is great, and you get to have this great experience that and they just framed it that way. And so that is actually how the team, the clients, ended up taking that message. And so he actually said this morning, he was reading to me offline some of the messages he got from players and families that it was the best week of basketball they've ever had. And so it's kind of this, and we were talking about how the attitude, the nervousness, the frustration, the anxiety, whatever all that is of the leadership is ultimately mirrored by the team. So it's the mindset of kind of like the Marines and the military where they sit there and are prepared for anything. So that was one big thing that I took away of Bad things are going to happen, even with the people the teams that I work with and the clients that I have. That bad things are not going to go well. We're going to be unprepared. We're going to get requirements late. We're going to get the answers we want, or it's going to take 2 weeks to get a response. Like all this sort of stuff is going to happen. But one, you just prepare for the unexpected. You just know when you prep your team that things like that are going to happen. The second thing that we talked about when we were just talking about elite teams, and both Jason and I kind of said the same thing as our bullet point number 1 or 1A, or the thing you star on what elite teams have in common. And we both feel and continue to feel that it is that all team members really have the mindset of service to one another. That those all elite teams, everybody's going to have an ego. If it's in business, it's about the dollar, the recognition, the notoriety that you solve solutions and that your name is called and everybody thinks you're the smartest person in the room. And athletically, it may be I get the most shots, I score the most points, play the most minutes, everybody relies on me. And even in those, if you have those mindsets, that you are still not potentially going to have the best team that you possibly can have. It's serving one another and caring more about other people. And it's actually hit me more this week because I'm reading a great book called Why Successful People Win. It's a book by John Maxwell, and he talks about the number one thing of successful people and successful teams is the service to one another, how they treat one another, how they focus on one another first before points, touchdowns, and business and products and all that sort of stuff. It's about how we can work together, and essentially what that winds up being in my eyes is the elimination of people's egos. And it's not that I used to say this, and Jason actually has shifted my mindset with this. I used to say the worst things you can be professionally and kind of definitely athletically and professionally a little bit is you don't want to be selfish and you don't want to be soft. Like you want to have an edge and a toughness to you, and you don't want to be selfish. You want to be thinking of other people, and you don't want to have all this stuff on you. And so we used to talk about Michael Jordan, and Jason actually corrected me once. He was like, yeah, Michael Jordan was really selfish. He was a very selfish player because he knew in order for them to win that he had to have a certain role. So even though you may want the shots or the recognition or the sales or be the smartest dev in the room or salesman or whatever it is, that is your role. You need to fulfill your role because in order for the team to be successful, you fulfill that role. And that's not being selfish. That's not being selfish. There's a difference between being selfish, thinking you have to have everything. There's another thing of fulfilling your role, but also supporting everybody else in their role and really thinking about other people. So those are, we only have about 10 minutes with this and with this great backdrop, but those are two things that really stuck with me. And I hope that as you go about your day, that there are things that happen that you're observant to, your eyes are open to, that you can take in to make your teams better, to make yourself better. And today my mind and eyes and ears were open to Jason talking about staying calm. There's a great scene in the movie A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise where he is sitting there the day before the trial with Demi Moore and the other gentleman that ends up being on the bench with him as their lawyers taking Jack Nicholson to trial. And essentially, he's coaching everybody up the day before the trial in his living room, and he's looking at everybody saying, when things don't go our way, nobody flinch, nobody move, nobody roll your eyes, make it seem like you were prepared for what just happened. And that's leadership, and that is knowing bad things are going to happen, but also being absolutely prepared for it and being able to pivot to solutions as quickly as possible with your team. So those are the two things, like being able to pivot, knowing bad things are happening, but also on the other end, great teams, my belief is first and foremost are teams that think of each other first with their eyes focused on outcomes and where they're going to be and what they're delivering and the services they provide, but also thinking of and fulfilling their role, but also supporting everybody else in their role and making sure the other people, everybody is growing in their role. So I hope you enjoyed this episode from the Microsoft offices here in Midtown St. Louis in the Cortex area that's really growing in the St. Louis area. Really appreciate you listening and the support that you've given the podcast. Head over to our YouTube channel to see what we have going on here at Microsoft and in Midtown St. Louis, and appreciate any feedback you give to us. And great spending 10 or 15 minutes with you on a Tuesday here in St. Louis. Thank you. Get out of your cube.